Anthony Joshua versus Dominic Breazeale. The gloves are off on Sky Sports. This is my review. Now, it's just as well that Anthony Joshua is exciting in the place where it matters most in boxing, which is the ring. Because outside of the ring, I think it's fair to say that he is lacking in the charisma department. He don't really have the gift of the gab. And again, there are many fighters who don't. But as long as you're delivering in the ring, that's the most important thing, because that is the product at the end of the day. Now, being exciting outside of the ring obviously helps as well. If you're charismatic and you got the gift of the gab and all that, you can shift even more tickets. You can become an even more compelling and interesting character. Anthony Joshua, for me, I personally find a lot of his interviews these days, particularly the Sky Sports stuff, and it has to include these gloves are off episodes, I find them virtually unwatchable. Because he is so robotic, so rehearsed, so marketing and PR entry level trained that it's just, oh man, it's difficult to actually sit through hearing him give these robotic answers and all this kind of stuff. It's like Vladimir Klitschko, only worse. I'm not a fan of the overly media trained type personality anyway that you get from newsreaders and many politicians and what have you. You always get the feeling that people are not being sincere. They're not really speaking from the heart. And with AJ, I don't necessarily get the impression that he's not speaking from the heart. I think he's saying what he really feels, but I guess the delivery is, the delivery leaves a lot to be desired. Basically, that's how I see it with AJ. Again, it don't really matter at the end of the day for a boxing fan, as long as he's delivering excitement in the ring. It is what it is. But as far as this face-off with Breazeale, what did I take from it? The same thing which I've been saying so far in the build-up to this fight. Breazeale seems a lot more confident to me than Charles Martin. I felt Charles Martin looked nervous, even at the face-off. Some people have said, are these Americans who are coming over to fight Joshua intimidated by his demeanor? Because people are saying Joshua's trying to put across this kind of surly, understated but menacing aura. That's what he's going for with the way he's approaching these gloves are off and these face off and stuff like that. He's trying to go for this, brooding type of act. Yeah, that's what people are saying. And they're saying maybe that's what's intimidating these American fighters like Charles Martin. I don't think Charles Martin was intimidated by Anthony Joshua's character. I think if Charles Martin was intimidated by anything, I think he may have been intimidated by Anthony Joshua's physique. I think that might have intimidated him a bit. And obviously, once he got in the ring and realized it was difficult for him to land any punches, I think he was even more intimidated then. But when it comes to Dominic Breazeale, I've said this before, and I've seen nothing so far to sway my opinion in any other direction. I expect Dominic Breazeale, from a courage standpoint, to leave it all in the ring against Anthony Joshua. I don't think he's going to sit down and look up at the ref and just wait for the ref to count to 10 the way that Charles Martin did. I don't think so. Dominic Breazeale has passed a gut check before in his career. At least one gut check, which was against Amir Mansour. And against Mansour, I'm not fully aware of exactly Breazeale's life history and his background and whatnot. But to my knowledge, he's not a street guy. Whereas Amir Mansour is about as street guys get in boxing. Yeah, this guy did serious time for drug trafficking. He was definitely involved in that street life. He went to prison for a long time, like 10 years. He was fighting guys in prison. This is a hardened man, Amir Mansour. They don't call him hardcore for nothing. It's a very appropriate name. So if anybody was going to intimidate Breazeale, I would have thought somebody like Mansour would have been able to do it, particularly after Mansour dropped Dominic Breazeale very heavily. But Breazeale was so defiant in that fight. You can go watch that fight. Look at Breazeale's body language. He was defiant. When he got caught with that big shot and dropped, he didn't curl up into a ball. He didn't go into his shell and feel like, wow, I'm in here with a beast. I'm in here with this, street guy who's been to jail and he's a tough guy and all this business. He didn't feel none of that. He was like, to hell with that. I'm going to fight you right back. I don't give a damn about where you've been in life or, how many years you've done in prison. I'm here to fight you. So I think it will be the same with Joshua. I don't think he's going to psychologically fold. So Joshua better be on point in this fight. From a tactical point of view, from a fitness point of view, and from a psychological point of view. He can't get too cocky here because he's in with a guy who, if it turns into a trench warfare situation like it did with Dillian Whyte, I think that Dominic Breazeale could potentially give Joshua more problems in the trenches than Dillian Whyte did. Now, Dillian Whyte has admitted he wasn't in the greatest shape. He had a problem with his shoulder. I'm assuming that Dominic Breazeale ain't going to have those kind of problems. That he will be in better punching shape and he won't have any type of shoulder problems or anything. And he's bigger than Dillian Whyte as well. So if it gets to a situation where they're in the trenches, I think Dominic Breazeale might actually be able to give Joshua some issues and ask him some serious questions. But the main question is, can Dominic Breazeale take Anthony Joshua into that kind of fight? And you would probably have to say it's unlikely. Dominic Breazeale is not the most talented guy. He's definitely not the fastest guy. I've seen many of his fights, and I've also been watching his training footage. He stands very square, particularly for a tall guy. Squares his shoulders up, leaves himself vulnerable to straight shots down the middle. He doesn't get proper extension on a lot of his punches. He tends to throw a lot of bent arm shots. And Joshua, as we know, does get good extension on his shots. He can throw that right hand straight from long range, as we saw against Charles Martin. So from a technical standpoint, Joshua is far superior to Dominic Breazeale. They were both at the 2012 games, obviously. Joshua had better results than Breazeale did, although a lot of people are still complaining about a couple of those decisions that Joshua got, but they failed to mention the legitimate wins that he did also have against good opposition in the Olympics too, and at other times in his amateur career. So, the pedigree here is definitely with Joshua. The technique is with Joshua. He's on home turf. He is the more rounded fighter. He's the more athletic fighter. In terms of punching power, maybe he hits harder than Dominic Breazeale too. You would imagine he probably does. So what does Breazeale really have here? All he's got is mental toughness, size, and he has to try and weather the early storm and either draw Joshua into a war or, like I say, weather the storm, take that beating and try and push Joshua into a war. Push him back, maybe make it physical, go to his body. If Breazeale's team have got any sense about them at all, they should be aiming to tuck up extremely tight, crab-like defense and not try and get too ambitious early on. Just maybe go with a jab and on the inside try and lean on Joshua, go to his body, etc., etc. And then maybe in the second half of the fight or from the middle of the fight onwards, start to unload a little bit more. If they've got any type of wisdom to them at all, because from a talent perspective, this fight is not close. If he tries to unload on Joshua early on, there's a very good chance that he will get taken out. And he may have heart, he may get up, but the referee, particularly in the UK, ain't going to allow him to take that much punishment. So, yeah, anyway, that's what I took from The Gloves Are Off. It was boring, I have to say, as most of these Joshua Gloves Are Off are. The only Gloves Are Off I can remember of Joshua was Joshua's that was actually entertaining was maybe the Dylan White one, because of the fact that there was genuine tension there and they didn't like each other. And Dylan White's always an entertaining character anyway. You know, in terms of gift of the gab and charisma, Dylan White has that. So he made it worth watching. But with this one here against Dominic Breazeale, you know, Breazeale is pretty much anybody's got more charisma than AJ. Let's be real. That's just in my opinion. So Dominic Breazeale is not exactly Muhammad Ali with charisma, but he was at least slightly more interested in Joshua with the way he comes across and the stuff that he says. You know, it was what it was. I don't think any of it will matter in the ring. There was nothing there that in the press conference that, in the gloves are off, that raised an eyebrow or anything like that. Maybe some people are saying Joshua's getting a bit too overconfident, a bit too cocky. Maybe that came across a little bit in the gloves are off for some people. But for me personally, it didn't change the way I'm looking at this fight in the build up to it at all. I just see it as the same as I've always done since the fight got signed. It's a fight Joshua should win, but if he does get too cocky, or if he don't pace himself correctly, or don't use the right tactics, he could end up in some deep water because, as I say, Dominic Breazeale does have heart, and if he can get you in deep waters, he'll go for it. So those are my thoughts, people. If your thoughts are different, if you took something else from this gloves are off, if you saw something that you think I've missed, then please drop it in the comment section below and enlighten us all. And how do you see this fight going between Breazeale and Joshua? Do you think the psychological aspect of this is particularly important? Do you see any mental weaknesses in either one of these guys? Let me know. It's your boy Hatman, I'm out.